Good afternoon and welcome to today's Wednesday webinar. Today we're going to be talking about Strive Analytics and some of the data that you can get out of Strive and how to make sure you're set up to get that data out of Strive. So, okay, come on computer, advance for me. There we go. Today I am Paige Parker and
Hey,
I'm going to
Paige.
be the presenter. I'm
Hey,
not showing
Paige.
my screen, am I?
We're not seeing your screen yet.
Thank you.
We're pros at this.
Yeah, that's a little button I forgot to click. Appreciate you. Appreciate you. So I'm Paige Parker, and I'm going to be the presenter today. And you just heard Joel Atkins. He's going to be I've been calling him my backup brain today, but he's going to be answering questions as we go through the presentation, and we'll probably jump in and get me to answer some of those questions so that everybody can hear. And then Shanna James was going to be with us, but she is in another meeting right now, so she's not on at the moment. And as we were talking about questions, you do have a questions box over in your panel on the right-hand side, and we're going to ask that you put any of your questions there. We have your audio turned off because it's just too many people, and we have issues with feedback when everybody's breaking in and trying to use audio. So if you'll put your questions in the question box, then Joel is going to be answering those as we go along. We do ask that you keep your questions to today's topic. If a question comes up that's not on today's topic, we're going to ask that you put those in an email to training@eduphoria.net. It's just too difficult for us to keep up with all the questions on topic if we get sidetracked with ones that are off topic. So we can address those. Happy to answer them, but we'll address those at another time if you'll send them to us in an email.
And can I add this real quick?
Yes, sir.
Happy birthday, Paige. It's Paige's birthday, everyone.
Why, thank you very much. I'm at that age where celebrating is like, I'd rather keep it low key. Nobody
Oh,
needs to know how old I am. But thank you for the birthday wishes. I appreciate that.
well, 29 is
29,
quite a milestone.
29 and holding forever. That's right.
That's right.
All right, so here is our agenda for the day. We're going to talk about what you expect to get out of data, what you're going to do with the data, who will use the data, because that makes a difference in terms of what you're going to pull, what reports you're going to look at, and how you might want to set it up. We'll look at some examples of reports, and we'll look at some examples of appraisal analysis. We'll also talk about the summative panel a little bit, and then we'll talk about setting up for success, making sure that you have everything in place to get the data that we're going to talk about today. All right, so we are jumping in and looking at data reporting. So we're going to look at some different kinds of reports. I'm going to actually jump over into my demo site to show it from there. So I'm going into Strive and open. I can come over here to the left-hand side and go to reports. So I'm going to go to appraisal reports first and talk about the document analysis report, and then we'll talk about these other reports and how you might want to use those. But document analysis is really more on topic for today. This is where you can get data about what you're doing in your process. So this is a one document at a time report. It's not comparative. I'm just going to look at one thing. So maybe today I want to know how are things looking with our walkthroughs. So I can go into my walkthroughs folder and I can find one of the documents that is being used in my district. So I would say I know that the matrix here, the 1 through 3 matrix, is being used. So that's the document I'm going to look at in my report. And I can come over here to my print icon, and I have some choices. I can say I want to print the document with percentages by group, the document with appraisers, or I can export it to a spreadsheet and work, change that, reorient it, sort my data, manipulate it in any way that I want to once I get into a spreadsheet. For today, I'm going to click on the print document with percentages, and then that would download a PDF document for me. Because of time, I'm going to come over here and show the document here instead through a screenshot. So this is what you would get when you pull that document analysis, and it's going to take each one of the questions on that. In this example that the screenshot is from, I actually pulled an observation document rather than a walkthrough. And so it's showing me distinguished, accomplished, proficient, development, and improvement needed. The walkthrough documents don't usually have those ratings on there because it's really not possible to come up with a rating of distinguished or versus accomplished in a 15-minute walkthrough. So those usually have observed, not observed, needs improved, or needs addressing, something like that, or but not an actual rating. In this case, though, since it's an observation document, I can see that of the people that I have observed here, 8 of them are proficient, 2 accomplished, and 1 distinguished, and I get my overall percentages there. So I can get some data about what's going on with my school, with my campus, with our process by looking at that data. I can also go in and look at some other reports. First of all, are there any questions about the document analysis report?
None so far.
Okay. One of the things I will point out on this one is that when I do the printing, I do have the ability to print a document with appraisers, and I'm going to do that and see if it downloads it for me. Here we go. So now I can see it's going to be broken down by the appraiser. So it's going to show me an appraiser's name. I don't have any data in here, so it's not really giving me anything. It should be showing me like one appraiser's name and then all the people they evaluated, then the next appraiser's name and all the people they evaluated. So if you break it down by appraiser, that kind of helps you to see who's done what. In addition to how have our teachers done, you can see how your appraisers have done in terms of the numbers that they have completed at that point. So you do have that option when you print on the document analysis report. Other reports that are less about analyzing your data, but they're more about just efficiency with your process. One is the evaluation status report. And this report is especially helpful if you choose detailed by appraiser, because it's going to get you completely different information. You can include people who only do walkthroughs if you want to, or you can not check that box and then you'll get only the full appraisers in your report. And then you can also choose whether or not you want to show appraisers that have not completed any appraisals. Whole different reason for running the report, but it's going to get you that information. Then I can set my date range. It's going to default to whatever your instructional calendar says. And then I'm going to submit that report. You can also export it to a spreadsheet if you want to, but I like this version because it gives me pretty little green check marks, and I can see I did it by appraiser, so it's going to show me the appraiser's name, and then it's going to show me all the teachers' names and what has been completed and when it was completed. So I might have my people listed more than once. You can see here that Lockhart's name is in there 4 times. That will be the case if they've had multiple documents. So if I've had a couple of walkthroughs, an observation, and a summative, my name's going to be listed there multiple times. But for each one of those documents, I will have a date that it was completed, a date that it was made viewable. That's when the appraiser clicks the button that says let staff view, and then the date that I actually viewed it. And you'll notice that there's a lot of them here that say not sent. Any of those documents that say not sent, that means that the teacher can't even see them, doesn't even know that they're out there. I mean, they know somebody was in their room, but they've never seen that document. If that document was never seen, it's like it doesn't exist. And so that document will not get archived if you were to run an archive at this point. Now, this document down here that has a date that it was viewable, but it was not viewed, that one will be archived because the teacher had the option of seeing it. If they chose not to click on it, there's nothing we can do about that. But because the principal made it viewable, that document does exist as part of the process, and it would be archived if I ran an archive. I would like to say that all of the documents are viewed before they get archived, and this is something that you can run periodically just to keep track of that. Who's viewed them, who's not? Do we have one appraiser who has not made any of his viewable, like this one up here at the top? Or do we have one appraiser who's made them viewable, but their people just aren't looking? Maybe I would want to talk to them a little bit too. And then this is a good thing to run at the end of the year when you're getting ready for that archive, just to see if you're ready for that archive.
And Paige, I was going to add that this is the right time right now for districts to run that report. So a lot of like central office staff are usually running this type of report right
Yes.
now, just doing like a middle of the year checkup to see where the evaluation status is for making sure the appropriate number of walkthroughs are being done and that the observations are starting. But this is a report that is current for now. I think, are we doing a mid-year check webinar coming up,
We
I think?
we have one scheduled.
Okay.
And so
And that,
that way it is,
yeah.
this is a good time. It's also a good time, if you haven't already done it, to run that goal summary spreadsheet export, which is the next one. So again, I'm going to say whether I want to look at my student growth goals or my professional goals, and I might do one and then go do the other one. Again, it's going to default to your instructional calendar dates, but you could change that if you want to. And I'm going to pick one campus, and then I'm going to submit that report. And this one is going to generate a spreadsheet. It does not, you don't have the option of generating a PDF, but it gives you all the information that you need. And again, you can sort it however you want to. So I'm going to blow that up a little bit. So hopefully it's readable. And what it's going to do for you is give you all of your usernames. And then I have columns for unsubmitted, submitted, approved, completed, and archived for my goals. And then I can see who their appraiser is. What should be happening at this time of the year is I should have goals in the approved column. So this goal that's unsubmitted should have already been submitted and been approved. And that's where we want to find it, over here in the approved column. Because you want the goals to be approved while the teachers are working on them. Teachers have to submit them, appraisers have to approve them. At the end of the year, I want to see all of those approved goals moved into the completed column, because they won't get archived until they are moved into the completed column. Once they've been marked completed by the teacher, then either their appraiser can go in and archive them, and that's my preference, is that the appraiser do the archiving, because that's something that can be done in the summative conference at the end of the year. And it's like the closing of the contract. So when I submit a goal, I'm opening the contract, my administrator approves it. When I mark it completed, then the administrator needs to answer that by saying, yes, I agree that you have completed it, and they do that by archiving it. But if they did not archive it and it's in the completed state, then it will get archived when you run that end of year archive process. So this is a good time to be looking and making sure all of your administrators have approved all of the goals that are sitting out there, so that they know what the teachers are doing, and the teachers know that they're good to go to keep working on that goal throughout the year. Okay, and then the last one that I wanted to just mention is the unsigned documents. And this is another one that will help you before the archive, but I can go in and say, what am I specifically looking for? Well, I don't have walkthroughs signed in my process, because there are just so many of them, but I do have observations and summatives and staff evaluations. So I could go and submit that. It's going to give me a PDF document, again, that's going to show me what the document was, when it was done, and then who was the staff member, did they sign it, and did the appraiser sign it? So I could go in and see if those signatures are there. If it's not signed by both parties and it's a document that requires a signature, it will not archive. So again, before I run the archive, I want to make sure that any documents requiring signatures are signed, and I can run this and see who do I need to talk to about getting those signatures done. So those are really more functionality reports than they are data analysis, but it's good information to know about how those work. If there aren't any questions that I need to jump on at this point, then I'm going to move on to appraisal analysis.
You're doing good.
Okay, so we're going to look at a specific report, appraisal analysis. It's not really a report. It doesn't generate a PDF. It generates a dynamic screen that you can look at and get your data from, but then you can change it constantly to say, well, how would that compare to this? Let me put these two things together. So you're constantly going to be using the appraisal analysis feature to look at the data in different ways rather than generate those static reports. So when I go to appraisal analysis, sometimes this screen looks a little bit overwhelming. So we're just going to go part by part into what you're doing here. So these are all the things that you can choose to get the data that you want. Each one of these gray boxes is an option for you to pick something in your analysis process. So I'm going to go first to the framework, and you have to select something. So I'm going to choose t-test. And then I could say that I want to see the whole thing, but that's a lot of data to look at in one place. Um, it's sometimes overwhelming. I usually like to look at one domain at a time and say, today I'm just concerned about instruction, and I want to look at that and how my district is doing with instruction. Maybe I'll come back later on, or maybe in 10 minutes, and I'll look at the learning environment. Or maybe I just want to know the one that I'm the most concerned about is content, knowledge, and expertise. So I'm going to uncheck the instructional domain because I don't want the whole thing. I just want one dimension. And that's what I want to find out about today. How are we doing in that one dimension? And then I can come over and choose which documents I want to include in that analysis. So unlike the document analysis report, where I could only look at one specific document at a time and how people were doing on that one document, here I can compare. So I can say from the observation to the summative, did we see any changes in this one area? So the observation and the summative are similar in instrument, but they're at different times of the year. Did I see growth? Did I see the opposite? I mean, what exactly is going on? So I can compare different documents. I could even compare how are we doing on the walkthroughs versus a formal observation. Now, I do want to talk about one thing here. When I was doing observations and summatives, they're usually in the same format. They're usually matrix questions. And so you're going to have the answers to matrix questions to compare. And usually both observations and summatives are going to have those ratings: distinguished, accomplished, proficient. And so that's going to be an apples to apples comparison. Walkthroughs, like I said earlier, usually don't have that distinguished, accomplished, proficient rating system because you can't get that detailed in the short amount of time that you're there. But I am going to show you an example where you can compare and still get some data. So I could choose multiple documents. I'm going to choose my date, and maybe for this particular report, I just want to see this year, how are our walkthroughs and observations comparing? But maybe I want to see another set of dates. So I can come up to the top and I can change my start date, and I can go back. Unfortunately, there's not a year button. I don't know why we don't have a year button, but we don't. So I have to do the single clicks here, and maybe I just want to go back to, I'll go all the way back to August. There we go. So I'm going to say August 1st of 2017 through 2020. So I'm going to have 2 years worth of data that I'm looking at here. Or maybe I just want to look at last year. That's up to me. So I can look at how much time I want. Then when I scroll down, I can choose specific groups. Do I want everybody, or do I want to look just at one campus? If I'm a principal, I'm going to obviously choose my campus, but at a district level, I can choose one campus, or I can put all of my campuses in there. If I put them all in the group, then it's going to mix all of their data together. We'll talk about comparing groups in just a minute. So if I said I wanted to do Blue High School and Hogwarts High School, it's going to mix the data from both of those. So I'm not going to be able to tell who's Hogwarts and who's Blue. I can select my appraisee type. In this case, because I selected a t-test dimension, automatically eliminates some of my groups, but because I selected the formal observation, I'm not going to have that if I don't limit it, if I don't narrow it down, then it's going to include both T-test teacher and T-test waiver. And so the T-test teacher waiver group will have walkthroughs, but they won't have observations. So that's not going to give me really good data because I'm going to have way different numbers on the walkthrough side than I have on the observation side. So because I'm including an observation in my choices, I'm going to narrow it down just to the group that gets both walkthroughs and observations. I don't want to include anybody that doesn't get that observation. And then if I wanted to, I could narrow it down even further. If I am the principal who's in charge of the language arts department, maybe I just want to see my language arts teachers. So I could narrow it down that way. Or if I'm a building principal, maybe I want to see all teachers, all subject areas, but I just want to see a couple of appraisers. How is Misty doing? And where's my Hogwarts? How's Dumbledore doing? So I can narrow it down to just the people that they appraise. It just depends on what you're looking for. And then I can also narrow it down by grade level. So you can narrow it down as much as you need to get the specific data that you want. And then when you're done, you'll click the Analyze button. I'm not going to click the button here and wait for it to go because it does take a couple minutes to render. And also I don't have the greatest data in my demo site. So I'm going to flip back over and we're going to look at a screenshot. This is analyzing, where'd I go? This is analyzing a specific dimension. So I showed one example where I just selected dimension 2.2 and said that's all I want to look at. So this is going to show me just that dimension. And I can see I had pulled out here professional goals and professional development as well as the observations. So I can see how many of my teachers set a goal that included, in this case, I chose dimension 2.1, achieving expectations. So 24% of my teachers wrote a goal that was related to achieving expectations. When I look at professional development, 35% of my teachers have attended professional development related to achieving expectations. So I can't really say, for example, that all of this 24% is part of this 35%. I hope so. I hope that all of these people who made it a goal also attended professional development, but I can at least see that I'm not lacking in that number. So that gives me a little information about what people are doing with my PD and what's happening in the goals. And then I can look down at the bottom and see how are my teachers performing in that particular area on their observations. And so what I see is what I would hope to see. It's a bell curve, it's just laying on its side. So I would hope that proficient would have the largest number. That's really the goal with T-test. They say that proficient is the rock star rating. So that's where I would want to see the majority of my teachers. And then accomplished and distinguished, it's going to go down a little bit for each of those. The same for developing and improvement needed. So this curve here is about exactly what I would hope to see, a bell curve of that sort of proportion. But if I don't see that, if I see the majority of my people are getting distinguished, does that mean I have like just a really incredibly gifted faculty, or does it mean I have some easy graders on my staff? So I can look at that data and make some decisions about what's happening really in our process by looking at those numbers. The second example that I was showing you is that I can choose walkthroughs and observations in a side-by-side. Now, in the actual report, what you would see is this left-hand side, the walkthrough data would be at the top, and then the observation data would be at the bottom. But because of my screen orientation, I put the screenshots side by side so that you can see how you would compare them. It's not exact because, again, I'm not looking at distinguished, accomplished, proficient, whatever in a walkthrough. In this particular walkthrough document, it's check boxes. And so it lists all the look fors for each one of the dimensions, and those look fors are sort of categorized. That look for would look like this at the distinguished level. So at the distinguished level, they provide opportunities for students to establish high academic and social emotional expectations for themselves. Whereas at the proficient level, the teacher sets academic expectations that challenge all students. So the difference here in that look for is the teacher sets them at the proficiency level, the students set them at the distinguished level. At the accomplished level, the teacher provides opportunities for them to establish high expectations for themselves academically, but not social emotional. So that's the difference there. So as the administrator goes through on this document and checks off, well, I saw it where the kids were doing it for both, or I saw it where the kids were doing it just for academic, or I saw it where the teacher was setting those expectations, that would determine which box they checked. Now, in setting up the boxes, in order to be able to compare the data, I put a number in front of each one of those look fors. So if it's got a 5 in front of it, it is at the distinguished level. If it has a 4 in front of it, it's at the accomplished level. If it has a 3 in front of it, it's at the proficient level. And then the 2s and the 1s are down at the bottom where you can't see them in this screenshot. The reason I do that is because I cannot memorize all of those for the entire document and know which one is which in order to do some comparison. But I can look here and say, okay, I had, let's see, I had 2, 4, 5, 6. I had 6 here that were distinguished. And if I come over here and look at what my numbers are here, it's probably close to 6. If I were live, I would be able to float my mouse over that and see those numbers. If I come back to Strive, let me hit analyze and we'll see if we get anything. No data, okay. But if I was live, I would be able to float my mouse over that box and it would tell me 2 out of 129, 2%, or it would tell me whatever that percentage is. So if I do a little math and combine these numbers and compare it to this distinguished number, that's going to give me some comparison. And then I would have to look at my 4 group and combine those numbers to compare to accomplished. But I can see that data at the same time on my screen in order to do that comparison. I would be scrolling up and down rather than looking side to side, but I would be able to see all of that information to see, well, on the walkthroughs, the teachers are doing way, way better, but when I look at the observation documents, not so much. So what's the difference there? Do we need to tweak our walkthrough documents, or do we need to review the process with our appraisers? You can kind of see, what you need to look at a little more closely when you're here. And you'll notice even if I just look at this, I have my smaller percentages here, a little bit bigger here, same, smaller, a little bit bigger. I'm getting even bigger on my proficient. So just by scrolling down the list, I can see that bell curve forming in the walkthrough document as well. Okay, the next option that I want to show is comparing groups. So I'm going to come back here and edit and clear all of my selections out. And I'm going to say, again, I'm going to t-test, and I'm going to pick the instructional domain, or I could just pick one of my items. That's entirely up to you. And I want to do just my summatives from last year. So I'm going to go in and make sure that what I really wanted here was August of 18. I don't know how I got back so far.
Can you click on the 2017 start date and change it to an 8
I
right
bet you
there?
can. Aren't you Mr. Smarty Pants? There you go.
I am your
Um,
brain backup.
yes, you are my brain backup. And I've needed you all day long. Okay, so now I have last year's data. I'm going to be looking at last year's summatives whenever they happened during last year's school year. And so I want to see, how did our data compare? This time I'm going to go through and I'm going to say, I want to look at a feeder pattern. So I'm going to select, in my first group, I'm going to select Aqua Elementary. Now, when I clicked before, I was making a single group, And if I clicked and put Blue High School in there, they're in the same group, and I said it's going to mix all that data together, and I'm not going to be able to tell the difference. In this case, I want to be able to tell the difference. So I'm going to come down to the bottom of my screen. Let me scroll down. There we go. And I'm going to add another group. And in my second group, I'm going to pick a middle school. And then I'm going to add another group. And in my third group, I'm going to pick a high school. So I have created a feeder pattern. This is an elementary that feeds into this middle that feeds into this high school. You can only add 3 groups, but those groups can be anything you want. So you might want to compare group 1 is going to be math teachers, group 2 is going to be language arts teachers, group 3 is going to be science teachers. You can do whatever you want to. It can all be within one campus or however. So if I wanted to compare Aqua Elementary science, I would just put science up here in group 1 as well. Okay, so I'm going to pick my 3 campuses. Again, I could add additional criteria, but I would click my Analyze button, and what I would get is something that looks like this. So my elementary was the salmon color, my middle school was the gold color, and my high school was the maroonish color. And I can see still pretty much a bell curve, which is what I would hope to see. So I have pretty similar results. That tells me a couple of things. I would expect to see that building in a feeder pattern where they have some vertical alignment, and so there shouldn't be those huge gaps. And then also, I would hope to see some calibration among the appraisers in that feeder pattern, and it looks like I've got that. If I had any big discrepancies between one school or the other, then I might want to address that. So this gives you an idea of, are we all doing the same thing and doing it the same way? And that's more information that you can use to drive your process. And then the last option that I wanted to show is, we've talked about calibration just a little bit. I'm going to, well, I didn't need to do that. I'm going to remove my groups here. I'm going to keep 3 in there, but I'm going to change it up a little bit. So this time, maybe I want to do just one campus. I'm going to go to Blue High School, and I'm just looking at Blue High School. Let me come up here to group 1. Are you going to let me do it? Or am I going to have to start over? I may have to start over.
I think you have to remove the groups and re-add them. It's
Yeah,
just
it won't
based
let
on
me
your
go back up to the
yeah.
top one if I don't remove them. I was hoping to save myself a step, but no.
I
Um,
know. And you may have to clear all actually.
I think I'm going to have to clear all because now it won't let me scroll down below there. Okay, so back up to the top and back into t-tests, and maybe I want to do the whole thing for this one, just everybody and everything, and see how these 3 people that I'm going to look at compare in the way that they're appraising. So I'm going to go to summatives again, and I'm looking at last year's data. But when I scroll down, group 1, I'm going to pick an appraiser. So I'm going to find not my campus. No, I'm going to find, there we go. So I'm going to compare Misty, take out that one, and Kelsey, and Paula. Oops, I did not do that the way I meant to do it. Sorry. Group 1 is going to be Misty. Group 2 is going to be Kelsey. And then group 3 is going to be Paula. So now I have 3 different people, and I'm going to look at all of their data from summatives last year and see how they compare. So this is one of those calibration things that you can do to see how your administrators are aligning with each other. So now when I look at that one, Paula has way more proficient than anybody else. She didn't give out hardly any accomplished. If I floated over this in the live version and not a screenshot, that would probably be 1 person. So 1 distinguished and 1 accomplished, or maybe even 0. It's really hard to tell. So Paula gave almost everybody proficient and some developing, but she didn't go above at all. Then we have one person in here who gave a large number of accomplished, not very many proficient. And proficient is really where you should expect the majority of your teachers to fall. So why are all of hers falling up here under accomplished? I would want to kind of check that out. Maybe she did just get the appraisal group that is your rock star teachers, or maybe she's an easy grader. So I would want to kind of compare that. And I'd also want to be looking for, am I seeing a bell curve for each one of them? And I'm really not seeing a bell curve exactly for any of them. So that kind of gives me some information about my appraisers and my process in terms of, is it the same for everybody? And that's something I'd want to look at too.
And Paige, I would say that that is a definite report that should start be running now, just
Yeah,
for calibrating appraisers before they are getting into the observation and summative season, because
absolutely.
it will definitely help,
And
especially with
and
the
what
visual data.
Yeah, and what you want to see in t-tests as opposed to previous systems is growth. And so if we have some things that are a little out of whack in terms of different appraisers, how's that going to impact what we see in terms of growth by the end of the year? Is it going to reflect the right amount of growth if they're not kind of in line? So that's why it's a good time to look at this now, make sure everybody's on the same page, make sure everybody knows what we're looking for so that we see what we really are needing to see. I'm concerned here, if all these teachers were accomplished in the observation process, that's tough to beat. Are they all going to be distinguished by the end of the year? Is that a reasonable expectation? So I'd be a little concerned about that and want to have that conversation now before we get to the end of the year. So good point about this being one to run now. It's also a good one to run at the end of the year to see how you did overall. And then you have the time over the summer to do that just-in-time training, or let's do a refresh on t-tests and let's practice some walkthroughs together and see if we can all get recalibrated. So middle of the year and end of the year are good times to look at this information. Okay, how do you get that information out? I clicked on stuff and it showed up. That looks fantastic. But there's some stuff that has to be done first. So you have to make sure that you're setting yourself up to get the data that you want. We talked about the document types being apples to apples or apples to oranges when I compared the walkthrough to the observation. In order for it to be apples to apples, I had to put those number fives up here so that I could easily tell this is distinguished to compare to this distinguished. You have to set yourself up to be able to get that data out, or you have to be smarter than I am and have the ability to remember which ones and they're pretty fine distinctions sometimes, which ones go with distinguished and accomplished. So this is my cheater method to put the number in there and help me do the math to do the comparison. Whereas if I'm looking at just one type of document or documents that all use the same rating system, then that's really more apples to apples. Then I also have to make sure that my framework is set up and that all my questions are tagged. So let's look at that really quickly. I'm going to go into my system again, but I'm going to go to settings and I'm going to go to appraisal settings. For each of the documents that I want to get information from, each document that I'm using in my process, I want to be able to go in and say, this is the walkthrough that I looked at. So I'm going to look at that document. I want to make sure that it is set to the t-test framework, and in this case it is. If it says not set, and I don't know if I have any that are not set. Yep, this one says select framework, which means no framework has been chosen. If it's set like this and it doesn't have a framework chosen, then there's no way for the system to know what dimensions and domains are in there or to pull that data out for you. So you have to go in and tell it that up front. So I want to make sure that I'm just going to use that drop down, make sure that t-test is selected. That's step one. Step 2 is I have to make sure that each question is tagged. So I'm going to go into a matrix question. I'm going to look at the rows of the matrix question, and I want to make sure that each item, each row, has a dimension specifically listed. So these are all 1.1. They say 1.1 standards and alignment. If I come over here to this one that was not tagged, and I look at the rows here, it just says dimension. It doesn't have a number and it doesn't have the descriptor. So that means it's not really tied to any dimension. It just has a place for where the dimension would go. Because it's not tied to any dimension, it's not going to show up in any of my reports or in my appraisal analysis, because that's where that data comes from, is how you have them tagged. So I want to go in for each of my questions on each of my templates and make sure that on all my rows for my matrix questions, each row says the dimension number and the tag or the topic for that dimension, so that I know that I'm doing that correctly. If I go in and look at one that is not, let me see. Okay, so this is one that has checkbox questions. I'm still going to say I want to tag it, I want to tie it to the t-test framework, and I would go in and look at my questions. And this is a checkbox question, but I can still say posted vocabulary is current and applicable to the unit of study. That might be considered, let's see, where would I put that?
You
I
could do
might
it.
put that in,
Yeah.
I would say I might put it in classroom environment, because that's something that the kids would expect to know where to go and look for their, or classroom culture. It depends on how your district determines the difference between those. Some people consider environment to be like the physical, and some consider culture to be like our routines and procedures. So I might put it in culture if that's the case. If I'm considering it environment, it might be, okay, this is the vocabulary corner, and so it's a physical place. So maybe it's both. It might also be in,
Activities
might be in
1.4.
activities. That's a good place for it too. And it might be in communication. So as a district, you would have to decide, because these are not the language of t-tests, you would have to decide. In this case, we are specifically talking about the process of it being posted. So I'm going to say it's part of my classroom culture, because that's the routine, the process. That's up to y'all. Then visual representation posted on each wall, I would want to do the same thing. What would that be? Would that be classroom culture or classroom environment? Whatever it is, you decide, you're going to check it, and you're going to click the update button. So for each item, whether it's a matrix question or a checkbox question or even a comments box, if it's specifically related to one of the dimensions, even if it's a comments box like this one is, I could go in and say these comments are about collaborative teaching, and that is whatever differentiation maybe, and I'll update it. So you would want to make sure that every item in your document is tagged to a dimension. That's how the data shows up in that data analysis.
Paige, can you show how to change it in a matrix?
Yes.
How to update it there?
Very good question. So I'm going to go in. I didn't go all the way through that process. So I would go in to this one and say, in my rows, let's pretend this one's not done. I'm going to double click on it. That brings it up to the edit box up here. So I have to edit or make any changes. It has to be up in the top. So once it's up there, then I can come down here and say, maybe this one was really supposed to be data and assessment or something else. I'll make my change here and then click update row. And that changes it and brings it back down into this box down here. So again, I would just double click to get it in the edit area, make my change, and then update row. And that's going to make it be what you want it to be tagged to. This is where it's going to pull in on those reports or in the appraisal analysis.
And I do want to just add, because I know our support team gets a lot of this in questioning from staff in districts, is when you're principals or your central office staff are running these types of reports and they're not seeing data, or they get a no data message on Appraisal Analytics, it's support can go in and look, and the first thing they do is they look to see if a framework has been selected on the template information tab. If it still says nothing has been selected, that tells a lot. That means that the system is working correctly. It's not going to show you any data because your forms are not tagged, and that tagging has to happen in order for all that data to connect together.
And that's something that you can do, and we talk about in our end of the year checkups to make sure that all of your documents are tagged and ready to go for next year so that you do get that data. Now, another question that I get is, well, I didn't know this at the beginning and my people have already started doing this stuff and we don't have any data. That's okay. You can go in and tag them now, edit that template, get everything the way you want to, and then save it and click the update existing documents, and that will add the tags to any previously completed documents that were done before the tagging. That means they will be included in the data as soon as you push it out to them. So if you're just now finding out about this and you want to make sure you have good data, go in and check, update your documents, and then click update existing documents, and it will update the ones that principals have already done. So you won't lose out on that data.
And it will not it doesn't change the score. This doesn't affect
Correct.
scoring. This is all just on the back end to connect the framework to the document so that the information can run through analytics.
Exactly. It just adds that tag. It doesn't change anything else. And then the user and the administrator won't even know that it's been updated.
Right.
The only difference is their data will show up. Okay. So we've talked about ways to get what you want. You need to make sure that you're updating, that you're adding tags to all of your documents, every type of question. And then you can also get that data in the summative panel. To me, this is the most powerful. Well, I don't know. It's a toss-up between summative panel and data analysis because they both give you great information. But for the appraiser, this is probably the most powerful because they can go in and get all of that information to make their final decisions. I'm going to go back into Campus View over here, and I'm going to go to my test campus, which is Hogwarts. And find here, I'm going to do Lockhart. So this particular teacher he's done his professional goal, he's had some walkthroughs, he's had his observation, and now it's time for me to do that summative at the end of the year. When I click on the button to do the summative, I'm going to come back and show this in just a moment. This first time, I'm not going to copy anything in, and I'm just going to say save it, and we'll start opening it up. So it opens up with a blank summative document that should match whatever I did on the observation document. So I would need to have for this one, it doesn't really need to be, but usually it does match. So this looks like the observation, but I'm doing it at the end of the year. Remember that in t-tests, the goal is growth. So I should see a change from, or I would hope to see a change from the observation to the summative, at least in some areas. Not that they have to move up a level in every area, but I should see growth in some areas. So it may just be a couple of dimensions where the growth happens. In order for me to make the decision about where they should be, I want to look at all of that. So I'm going to come over here and click on Content Knowledge, and I will be able to see any evidence they uploaded. I'll be able to see this is my walkthrough document, and I can see what comments were made there, and I can see my observation document. Now, I'm only showing my evidence here because I never made this viewable to the teacher. So that's my bad in my demo site. That's why I'm not seeing the actual rating. But normally, I would see that on the observation, I marked him as proficient. And he gave a very detailed and accurate information in the lesson. That's what I wrote down. So I would take that, the observation information, plus what did I see in the walkthroughs. Well, he was very detailed and accurate in the observation, but during the walkthroughs, he needs to pay closer attention to individual responses, and a few students were off task. So maybe that together with the evidence or with goals or whatever, do I still think he's proficient? Or do I think he was proficient on that one day, but he's still developing overall? And so I can look at all of the evidence from the entire year when I make that end of the year decision. So that's why I like the summative panel so much, because it gives you everything all in one place. I can come down here and see everything related to classroom environment before I make that decision. Now, I'm going to delete that one and go back and do it over. And this second time, I'm going to click a button. Ugh, boy, I hope my data comes over, because I don't know if I don't know what state it's in. We'll find out. So I'm going to click here, and this time I'm going to say copy existing observation data into my summative. This copies over everything that they had in. So if there was a score, see, it didn't bring my data in. If there was
I was going to say, I saw in there your Mr. Professor Dumbledore did not make it viewable.
Yeah, that's what I was afraid of. Since
Yeah.
my data wasn't made viewable, it won't pull over. But if Dumbledore had done his job and clicked the Let Staff View button, then that check mark would be showing up here, or I would be seeing the dot for whatever was on the observation. My caveat about this is, yes, it pulls those ratings in and it pulls those comments in, but the administrators, the appraisers, still need to come over and consider the rest of the evidence and make sure that they are adjusting those as they go through. That can be a good starting point for them if that's how they want to get started. But I would want to say, well, it pulled in my observation comment, which was very positive. It did not pull in any of my walkthrough comments, because it only pulls from the observation. So do I need to add some of these comments in there too? Do I need to adjust some of my ratings? Because with PDOS, it was okay for them to have the same thing at observation time and summative time, because it was really just, what did you see? Check, you did it. But with T-tests, I really want to see change between the two. So I want to make sure that I'm taking what they did at observation and then updating it based on what I see in that summative panel. Again, the summative panel only shows up, this data only shows up if everything is tagged and if every administrator completes their documents the way you want them to. Since when I go back and look at Lockhart, I can see that one of his walkthroughs was not made viewable, so that's not showing up in the data. And the observation was not made viewable, so that's not showing up in the data. So I'm not seeing everything that I should be seeing because it was not completed. In order to have that copy over button that we saw, so when I went in to do the summative and I had the option of checking the copy existing data, your administrators won't even have that option unless you turn it on for them. So I'm going to go into appraisal settings, and I'm going to go to my templates, and I'm going to go to my summative documents and find the one that I'm using. And then I would want to go to my template options, and there is a checkbox here that says import existing evaluation data when summative is created. That doesn't automatically import it. It gives the appraiser the choice. But if this box is not checked, then I don't even have that copy button as a choice. So if you want them to have the choice to copy it over, you will check that button on the summative document, and then they will have the copy button. One last thing, if I'm going to say that I want to copy, then that the two documents need to be structured the same way. So in this case, my summative is one dimension at a time, evidence, the rubric, and then another dimension, evidence, and the rubric. So it has to be, whatever format I have on the summative has to match my observation. If I go into my observation document and I look at this one, no, this one, I think. Yeah, so no, yeah. So this one has a different format. It's not one dimension at a time. It's one matrix question per domain rather than one matrix question per dimension. If this is the observation form that I'm using and my summative form is one dimension at a time, that data is not going to copy over. The questions have to match. So if I wanted to use the summative that I just showed, I would need to find the observation document, which I think is this one, that matches it, that has evidence for one dimension and then the rubric. So this is the observation that matches my summative. I would need to make that happen in order to copy the data over. Any questions about that?
I mean, we don't have questions coming in about
Okay.
any of that, but I just wanted to say that is a lot of information, and if you're, I know a lot of people who are attending, they're not necessarily the T-test or T-pest person for their district, but they're the person
Exactly.
who manages Strive. If you are having questions or getting the shakes about this
Don't get the
information,
shakes.
like just reach out to
Yeah,
training@eduphoria.net, because we can help you. We can go in and kind of see what your settings are and make recommendations to help you. I mean, that we we know it's a lot of information. We also know our audience, and so we want to make sure we're here to help you. So if you are kind of like, oh, I'm not sure, just reach out to us. We'll help you.
absolutely. And that's true of this last thing. If your current observation and your current summative do not match, but your appraisers want to use that feature, that copy feature, you can create a new summative really easily by saying you want to copy a document, and then you get to copy the observation rubric into the summative folder so that your summative and your observation match. Again, if that's something that comes up and you're asked about it, just let us know and we can help you with that. We do have articles about it out in our help, and I believe, well, that's,
We do have articles about it in the
yeah,
help.
we do have articles about it in help. I thought help was my next thing, but
Those
help
are
is available.
There we
That's what I
go.
was going to show. There we go. And so you can go in and find articles in there. There is a Strive checklist. We usually go over that in a webinar at the end of the year and talk about cleanup for Strive and new features in Strive and getting your documents set up and ready to go for starting a new year. But if you're just now realizing that you need to tag some things or that you might want to change documents, do reach out to us and we'd be happy to help with that.
Mhm.
Okay, I hope that you found a tidbit or two that was helpful information for you, and reach out to us. Let us know if you have questions. You can email training@eduphoria.net and we'll get back to you as soon as we can.
Thank you, everyone. And
Thank,
again, happy birthday, Paige.
thank you very much, and I hope everyone has a great holiday week next week. Yay!
Oh, yeah, that's coming up.
Yeah,
I
I'm just
forgot.
gonna forget. All right, have a great afternoon. Thank you very
Bye,
much.
everyone.
Bye.